Hello everyone, we are here with Rose Percy at the Rose Percy event, and we are having an exclusive interview with the wonderful historian Ann Coleman. Ann, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good to see you. Did you have a wonderful event?
Absolutely. It created a great stir and a great outpouring of love and faith in Rose Percy and what she could accomplish for the veterans of this country, and it reinforced her value as a working girl for over a century, nearly 160 years of doing good deeds for our service people.
For our service people, and one of the things that we absolutely love is a good, hard-working doll, isn't it?
Absolutely, and most people think, oh, an old doll raising all of this money? This is unbelievable.
It is. And speaking of money, what was the final total? I know it was...
I think it was close to $110,000.
Fantastic. I remember the last figure I heard was 106, so that's incredible. That's the highest one to date.
Absolutely.
So we are here and the ropes are off, and we have an exclusive opportunity to get up close and personal and look at Rose Percy and her fabulous trousseau. That is where we are standing right now. And Rose Percy means a lot to you.
Well,
Can you tell us about that?
Rose Percy. I live in the nation's capital, and Rose Percy also was a resident of the nation's capital for most of my lifetime until she moved out of the Red Cross Museum and into the care and imaginative hands of Michael Canadas and David Robinson.
Yeah, and that is a very, very big job that they have, taking care of her and displaying her. When you remember seeing her at the museum, do you remember that first moment or what that felt like?
Well, I was about 5 years old,
okay,
Rachel, and at that point she was a miracle mystery doll, but she was behind glass.
Oh.
And now, for these special, very special events, she's out so that people can lean over and lean into all of her wonderful apparel items and the gifts that people have bestowed on her since she's been in Michael and David's care.
And speaking of the gifts, I know a lot of these things have been with her entire life, like the Tiffany jewelry and things like that. And a lot of this jewelry right here, in fact, I think this is all...
This is all gifts that you're
This is all gifts, okay.
at right now. And the Tiffany pieces are in there. If I can do this for you, bring it forward so that perhaps you can see the interior of this original Tiffany box or container that's designed specifically for her jewelry. And not only is it designed specifically for her jewelry on the inside, but it has the monogram of her on the outside.
Fantastic.
And these three boxes contain bits of her jewelry. At one point she lost 2 bracelets, but fairy godparents have replaced them following the outline, the shadow of the original pieces. Now the other bits of Tiffany items in her collection are her calling cards, and I don't know if you can read her name, Miss Rose Percy. And then this is the plate that these cards were engraved from. And we have also her calling card case, again with her monogram.
How wonderful. Now, Ann, you've written several articles and things on Rose Percy, and the title of one of your articles is reminiscent of the title of the book that we just received. Can you tell us a little bit about your literature and what you've written on the Sanitary Commission and Rose Percy?
Well, over the years I've tried to, because of my interest in Rose Percy, I've tried to collect information about not just Rose Percy, but other dolls that were in the various sanitary fairs around the country. And they range from dolls with elaborate wardrobes to very, very simple dolls to even Native American dolls, which were collected by men in the service in the West when they were serving in the West in the early 1860s. And this I found particularly interesting. It's not only dolls with fancy clothes, but also very simple things. And there's one wonderful story about a little girl who goes into her selection of dolls and picks out one that she can contribute to the cause, and she even describes that she made a little white dress and gave the doll a blue sash. And it's a doll that, as collectors we know, is a frozen Charlotte. So this was about 2.5, 3 inches tall. And you know that a child, we as adults giving money, we understand the need for it, but a young child doesn't always, and so this was a really, really emotional gift for that child. And it gives me goosebumps to this day to think about a small child, 5, 6 years old, taking her doll in to make money for the forces, the Union forces.
Right. And for a child to do that, it's just such a wonderful testament to her upbringing and basically what was going on at the time, what people valued.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. So we have this wonderful trousseau and everything that we are looking at, and you are very interested in fashion.
Unfortunately, yes, even though you wouldn't think so to look at me.
Well,
I've spent my whole time in somebody else's closets.
I love it, and we love it. And of course, fashion and dolls, they go hand in hand. And Rose Percy has some of the most wonderful fashions that we have seen. How did she get a lot of these clothes?
Well, Rachel, first of all, everybody should know that she's a girl. She's not a woman, she's a girl. And when you think of mid-19th century, 1860s fashion, you think of females wearing petticoats, petticoats and more petticoats and more petticoats. Rose does not have a single petticoat in her trousseau or wardrobe. She has slips. She does not have petticoats. And this is one of the indicators that she was specifically a girl and not a woman.
And how old do we think?
Oh, Rose was probably done for probably a year before the Sanitary Fair in New York in 1864. The girls in Mrs. Ogden Hoffman's boarding school probably worked for that amount of time on her. And what's wonderful is that you can tell from the clothing the sewing skills of the girls. Some were very, very proficient with stitches that you really need a magnifying glass on, and then others are a little bit more lax in their sewing skills.
But they could have been 4 and 5 years old, these children.
No, these girls were the same age as Rose represents, about a 12 to a 14-year-old girl.
And it's just so wonderful to see, and with her dog. So we have a lot of people tuning in that are just learning about Rose Percy, and especially learning about the Sanitary Fair Commission. Can you shed some light on somebody that might be watching that didn't know about it?
Well, the U.S. Sanitary Commission was established by Abraham Lincoln by proclamation, specifically for raising monies to take care of the needs of wounded soldiers, sailors, anybody in the military during the Civil War in the Union forces. In the South, there were also fairs of a similar sort, but they were not under the U.S. Sanitary Commission. And there were a number of these fairs around the country, particularly in 1863 and 1864. Those were the heyday of the fairs. And the fairs themselves lasted about a week as an average. And they were in large cities and small communities. And I'm not sure that even to this day we know where all of them were, because some of them were in really small communities in range halls and that sort of thing, whereas places like New York and Philadelphia, they had specifically built large-scale buildings for these events.
So it's like, for them to last and build large-scale buildings and last for a week, this was not some small little thing. These were very, very big events, almost akin to a large-scale circus type event. with entertainment and things going
Oh,
on.
absolutely. And they started out having colonial kitchens. Those were the first times that they had things like that. They had machinery. They had everything that you could want. And like fairs today, they had the baked goods. They had clothing for people. They had lamps, chandeliers, and all, literally anything that anybody would want to have.
Exactly, yes. So we are just giving our viewers a pan of this wonderful display. She always puts on such a show. Such a show. When you stand in front of her, you can just feel the history. I love that she has a little miniature of her own book. Rose pretty much has a little bit of everything. And how long have you been collecting and doing in the world of dolls?
Well, I started collecting shortly after the dinosaurs left.
So
because I'm now a
your whole
dinosaur
life.
myself.
You've been collecting your whole life. Can you recall a time in your life when you weren't a doll lover or a doll collector or drawn to the world of dolls?
Unfortunately not.
You're just our kind of person, my dear. You are our favorite kind of person. Look at all these wonderful things. And what do you think that dolls are put on this world for us for? What does a doll mean to you?
To me, a doll is a child's plaything. For them to learn about personal care, about how we dress ourselves, how we interact by social actions with tea parties and meal events and things like that, as well as how to interact with people, because you can tell your doll things that you might not tell a person, and also just to stretch the imagination of children. And I think that's so important, that children be allowed the freedom to have a private, quiet time with an object that they care for and can communicate with.
And then for adults, do you feel like it's reminiscent of childhood, or how they would have wanted their childhood to be?
I don't think so. I think that the doll is just so important in childhood, and a lot of people say that collectors cannot get over leaving their dolls behind in adulthood, but I think that for me, it's what the dolls have to say about the children of the particular time in which they were made. But that's just my take on it.
and it's interesting. I've met a lot of collectors this weekend that say, "Hey, I didn't know about this, and I wasn't given dolls as a child, and so I started collecting dolls in my 40s, and so they just discovered them later in life, and then it just started." So it's interesting to see when people started collecting and you know
how they're engaged with
and how they're engaged with them.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what is your, if somebody was watching this and they were wondering, say they're 40, 50, or they're 90 years old, and they're seeing this right now, and they just think, this is an incredible world that I didn't know was a part of, what's your advice for somebody to get started in doll world?
Start wherever your heart is drawn, and that's the most important thing. Whether you're buying a chair or that was made in the 1960s, an Ames chair, or whether you're 50s, I should say, for the Ames chair, even earlier probably. But pick something that you love and drawn to, whether it's the color, the texture, the size. There are all sorts of reasons, or whether doll collecting can be based on dolls that represent. We had a wonderful exhibit here of Red Cross dolls the other day.
Wasn't it fantastic?
Fabulous.
And they were all owned by the same lady, a retired nurse.
Yeah, and you collect things that draw you to them because of associations, of whether it's something that reminds you of a doll that you had in your childhood, a profession that you had in later years. There are all sorts of reasons to be engaged by.
Yeah.
And I was just in Japan and went to the Vokes factory, and Kyoto and to see the BJDs.
Oh, my
and that
goodness.
was a wonderful revelation to me.
Amazing.
Because I want to keep up with what's
happening.
what the future of doll collecting is going to be. To
Right.
me, Rose is just one wonderful link in the chain of doll history.
Of doll history, right. So, Anne, what are you personally focused on right now as far as doll collecting?
Right now, as always, I've been very interested in China shoulder head dolls, which are the dolls that were sisters of Rose's in the mid-19th century and later.
And we know you've written books and articles and so many things. You don't like to call yourself an expert, which is very smart, but many people feel that way because you just know so much and you're so generous with your knowledge. Thank you so much. What is the next event that you're going to be attending?
Well, I'm going in November to the Doll Collectors of America event, their annual meeting, which is a wonderful gathering of collectors from New England that have a very focused idea of collections based on New England dolls in particular. But there again, their interest is broadening out, and that's what one wants to see in doll collectors. They don't focus in, they also focus out.
Right. So in closing, we have Rose here. You know a lot about Rose. You feel a personal connection to Rose. What do you think Rose would want to say at the end of this event? This is going to be our last video. What would Rose say through the eyes of Ann Coleman?
Rose would say, doing what I'm doing is so satisfying. And if I were a human, I would get goosebumps over what everybody has done today for our people in service.
So fantastic. Ann, thank you so much for this wonderful interview. We appreciate it, and we'll see you very soon.